The cold has a way of swallowing sound, turning even the loudest engine into a lonely whisper. That night, as I rolled down that forgotten stretch of highway, the kind where the moon barely reaches and the wind bites down to bone, I heard something I'll never forget. A weak, trembling voice cutting through the dark like a plea carried on frost. Don't leave me here. I didn't even see her at first. Just the silhouette of someone hunched by the guardrail, shivering under the dim glow of my headlights. But the moment I stepped out of the cab, the weight of the night shifted. It felt like the road itself was holding its breath. Her name, I'd soon learn, was Eleanor Grant. Frail, wrapped in a faded coat that looked older than the highway itself. She stood there barefoot on the frozen asphalt, her fingers shaking uncontrollably as she held out one trembling hand toward me, the kind of gesture that hits a man deeper than a shout ever could. Snowflakes clung to her gray hair. Her lips were pale, and when I asked what happened, her eyes darted past me, toward the bushes on the opposite side of the road, as if something or someone had followed her out of the dark. I approached slowly, feeling the cold bleed through my boots, the diesel scent mixing with winter air sharp enough to cut. Eleanor kept whispering the same words over and over. Don't leave me here. Don't leave me here. Like a mantra that held her together. I could hear her breath breaking between each one. She wasn't just frightened. She was escaping something. Something human. Something close. My pulse thudded heavier in my ears as I tried to make sense of the quiet around us. Nights like that don't stay silent by accident. The bushes rustled again. Soft, controlled, not wind. I turned my flashlight toward the sound, but the light barely cut through the dense shrubs lining the frozen ditch. Even so, the air changed, tightening around us. Eleanor's grip latched onto my sleeve, surprisingly strong for someone her size, her voice cracking as she whispered, "Please, he's still out there." My chest sank. There was no confusion in her tone, no delirium, only raw, grounded fear, the kind people don't fake. My instincts sharpened, the way they do when the road stops being empty and starts being dangerous. I positioned myself between her and the bushes, scanning for movement, shadows shifting, branches bending, the outline of a man hiding in the dark. I didn't see him, but that's the problem with the desperate. They know how to stay low, how to stay quiet, how to wait. Eleanor's breath rattled as she leaned heavily against me, her frail frame trembling from cold and terror. I lifted her gently and guided her toward the warmth of my truck. Each step felt like walking through a dream too real to ignore. The night pressed in from every angle, the wind carrying the faint metallic scent of something that didn't belong to the open road. As I opened the cab door, Eleanor hesitated again, turning her head sharply toward the bushes, eyes wide, lips parting in silent dread. My flashlight caught a glint, just a flicker, just enough to raise every hair on my arms. Someone was watching us. Before I climbed into the cab, I scanned the ditch one last time. A breath of cold air moved against the shrubs, slow and deliberate, like a person shifting their weight just out of sight. Eleanor tugged my arm again, whispering through chattering teeth, "Don't let him take me back." And in that moment I realized something chilling. This wasn't a rescue. This was a pursuit. Eleanor clung to my arm with a grip that didn't match her fragile frame, as if the cold night itself might pull her away the moment she let go. I helped her up into the passenger seat, her breaths coming out in thin, trembling wisps that fogged the air. The second the door clicked shut, she crumpled into the warmth like someone whose strength had finally run out. Her hands shook violently as she pulled the blanket over her legs, her eyes never straying far from the window that faced the bushes. I circled the front of the truck, snow snapping under my boots, the engine's low rumble vibrating through the ground. The moment I stepped toward the driver's side door, there was movement again, subtle, deliberate, coming from that same dense patch of shrubs. A branch bent just slightly, leaves jostled. Not chaotic like the wind, controlled, intentional, as if whoever was down there was adjusting to get a better look. A cold prickle crawled up the back of my neck. I wasn't dealing with wildlife. This was a person who didn't want to be seen. I opened the door quietly, sliding into the cab and locking it the moment I was inside. Eleanor flinched at the click of the lock, her gaze snapping to mine, searching my face for any sign that we were safe. But safety didn't feel like an option tonight. The road looked endless and deserted, but I felt eyes on me, sharp, calculating, familiar with darkness. I'd seen that type before. Men who waited for isolation, men who hid from headlights, men who preferred bushes to conversation. Eleanor tried to speak, her voice small and cracked. She said she'd been out there for hours, lost, running, but every time she tried to explain who she'd been running from, her breath hitched, her chest trembling, her words crumbling into silence. I didn't push her. Trauma has a way of choking stories before they can leave the mouth, and I've learned that sometimes silence tells you more than words ever could. Her fear wasn't confusion, It wasn't paranoia, it was recognition. I turned the headlights toward the bushes, illuminating the area in harsh white glare. For a moment, nothing moved. No shape, no face, no limbs, just still branches beneath the frost. But then, barely visible, a shadow shifted deeper into the foliage, retreating slowly from the light. My jaw clenched. Whoever he was, he didn't want direct attention. He wanted cover, darkness, opportunity. I'd seen this dance before on long-haul nights, someone using nature as a shield, waiting for just enough distance to strike again. I eased the truck into drive, snow crunching as the tires rolled forward. Eleanor whispered, "Don't stop, please, don't stop." Her voice quivered with a dread that didn't belong to a random stranger stranded on the roadside. She wasn't afraid of the cold. She wasn't afraid of the night. She was afraid of him, whoever he was. And as the truck eased away, her tear-filled eyes stayed glued to the bushes until they disappeared into the rear view. But just before the curve swallowed the spot in darkness, I glanced back one last time. A silhouette rose from the ditch, tall, still, watching, the kind of stillness that comes from someone studying their next move. I kept driving, but the message was clear. That night wasn't done with us yet. The highway stretched ahead like a frozen ribbon, quiet and colorless beneath the moon. I pushed the truck faster than I normally would on an icy night, tires humming against the asphalt in a steady rhythm that usually soothed me, but nothing felt soothing tonight. Every few seconds I checked the mirrors, expecting to see headlights or a shadow or something moving where it shouldn't. But the road behind us was empty, too empty, as if whoever had been in those bushes knew better than to follow openly. Inside the cab, the heater fought the cold, filling the space with the soft hiss of warm air. Eleanor huddled under the blanket, her shoulders trembling. She kept rubbing her hands together as if trying to scrub away something that still clung to her skin. When she noticed me watching, she forced a weak smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I didn't think anyone would stop tonight," she whispered. I thought he'd come back for me first." I asked her who he was, keeping my voice low and steady, the way you talk to someone balancing between panic and collapse. Eleanor hesitated. Her gaze dropped to the floor mat, her fingers tightening around the blanket like she was afraid it might vanish. "His name is Samuel," she finally murmured. "He used to be my neighbor." She swallowed hard. "But he hasn't been himself for months." Her voice cracked. "I should have left sooner." I didn't interrupt. In my years on the road, I'd heard enough broken stories to know how to let them unravel at their own pace. Eleanor said that Samuel had started showing up at her house unannounced, late at night, early in the morning. At first, he'd claim he was checking on her, bringing groceries, offering help, fixing things that weren't broken. But then the visits grew strange. He'd stand outside her window for hours, leave objects on her porch, follow her into town without saying a word, the kind of behavior that escalates quietly until it's too late. She told me the last straw was just a few hours before I found her. She'd heard footsteps outside her house, slow, deliberate, dragging slightly. When she went to peek through the blinds, Samuel was standing in her yard in the dark, staring at her door like he'd finally made a decision. She fled. No coat, no shoes, no direction, just instinct pushing her into the cold night. And somewhere between her house and the highway, he followed. As she spoke, a faint tremor rippled through the truck, so subtle I almost missed it. A vibration that didn't belong to the engine or the road. I glanced at the mirrors again. Empty, but something in Eleanor's story sharpened my senses until the night felt thinner, as if danger pressed itself against the windows, waiting for a weakness. Eleanor turned her head toward the passenger side window, breath fogging the glass as she whispered, "He was close when you found me. I could feel him." She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, her eyes glistening. "He doesn't stop. Not when he wants something." The words settled heavy in the cab. I drove on, the engine rumbling, the road narrowing, the night deepening like it was closing a fist around us. And somewhere behind us, far enough to stay unseen, close enough to stay dangerous, I knew Samuel hadn't given up. Some men carry persistence like a burden, others wield it like a weapon, and the kind of man who waits inside bushes on a freezing night isn't the kind who quits. The night grew heavier as the road sloped into a wooded stretch, tall pines leaning over the asphalt like they'd gathered to watch something unfold. Their branches swayed slowly in the cold wind, scraping against each other in a whispering rhythm that crawled under the skin. My headlights carved long shadows across the snowbanks, each one stretching and folding like something trying to keep pace with the truck. Inside the cab, Eleanor sat stiffly upright, her gaze frozen on the side mirror. Every few breaths, she'd flinch at something only she could see, something just beyond the light, moving with the road but never quite stepping into view. The blanket around her shoulders rustled softly as she tightened it, fingers trembling in a way fear makes permanent. I kept my eyes forward, but my other instincts, the ones truckers rely on when the night gets strange, were awake, and wired. There was a feeling in the air, like an observer just out of sight. The kind of tension that doesn't come from imagination, the kind that comes from being followed. I lowered my voice. Was Samuel always like this? Eleanor's lips parted, but she didn't answer. Not immediately. She pressed her palm to her throat, steadying her breath. No, she said finally. He used to be kind. Too kind, maybe. The kind of man who brings your trash bins in without asking. The kind who remembers your birthday even when you don't want him to. She exhaled shakily. But kindness isn't the same thing as boundaries. And I didn't see the difference until he started crossing everyone. She told me how Samuel became obsessed with taking care of her, fixing things she didn't ask him to fix, checking on her when she didn't need checking on, insisting she shouldn't live alone anymore. When she tried to create distance, he reacted badly. He'd linger outside longer, show up earlier, stand closer. His eyes started to change, not the color, but the way they held her, like he wasn't looking at a neighbor anymore. He was looking at something he believed he owned. As she spoke, I glanced at the mirror. The road behind us was dark, swallowed by the tall pines, but the feeling of being watched clung to the truck like frost on steel. A shape could have been 2 miles back or 2 feet. Men like Samuel knew how to hide. They knew how to stalk. They knew patience the way some men know violence. I called the police, Eleanor whispered, more than once. Her voice cracked. But they said he hadn't done anything threatening. They said he seemed lonely, that he lived alone too. She squeezed her eyes shut. I told them loneliness isn't harmless if it starts thinking for you. A sound cracked through the night, a branch snapping somewhere between the trees. I stiffened. So did Eleanor. The noise didn't belong to wind or wildlife. It was deliberate, heavy, too close. I checked the mirror again, pulse spiking, searching for motion in the black between the trunks, but the headlights only revealed emptiness and drifting snow. Eleanor leaned closer to the window, her voice a faint tremble. He followed me all the way to the highway. I could hear him behind me, breathing hard, calling my name like we were in some kind of game. She swallowed, but when I reached the road, he stopped running. He crawled into the ditch instead, hid there, watching. Her next words chilled the cab more than the winter outside. He's not trying to catch me at once, he's trying to wear me down. Silence fell heavy between us. The kind that confirms the danger wasn't a memory. It was active, alive, moving through the night with intent. Then, from the far edge of the woods, something glimmered, just for a second. A reflection, a flash of metal, the kind a knife gives off when it catches distant headlights. My grip tightened on the wheel. We weren't escaping him. We were being tracked. The forest pressed closer the farther we drove, turning the road into a narrow corridor carved between shadows. The truck's high beams stretched ahead in long white spears, lighting up only what Samuel wanted us to see, because a man like him survived by staying in the places light didn't reach. My hands gripped the wheel tight, every muscle wired, every sense tuned to the silence outside. Eleanor's breathing shifted, steady at first, then faltering as a new realization settled into her voice. He didn't chase me because he panicked, she whispered. He chased me because he planned for tonight. She stared straight ahead now, eyes hollow with exhaustion. He watched me for weeks. He studied my routines. He knew when I'd be alone, and when the cold would keep others inside. Her fingers twisted into the blanket. He knew the night would help him. I kept the engine steady, letting the hum of the diesel fill the cab, grounding me. But even the sound of my rig, usually a comfort, felt frail against the weight of what we were carrying. The bushes along the roadside whipped and rattled in the wind, but every so often the pattern broke, revealing footsteps instead of gusts, subtle disturbances, fleeting shadows, a momentary glint of movement between trunks. Samuel wasn't behind us. He was beside us, keeping pace through the trees like he'd been practicing for years. The road curved, narrowing again as it dipped between 2 steep embankments. My headlights washed over a patch of snow where tracks crisscrossed, fresh ones, deep and purposeful, human. Eleanor's breath hitched. He walks faster than you think, she said, and he doesn't get tired. She shook her head slowly. I don't think he even feels cold. He stopped feeling things a long time ago. I didn't respond, but she wasn't wrong. Some men freeze from the inside out long before winter ever touches their skin. As we descended into a valley, our speed dropped almost without me noticing. My foot on the pedal grew hesitant, my mind pulling towards something I'd felt, but hadn't acknowledged. The sense that the road ahead wasn't safe anymore. The tall pines on both sides formed an arch overhead, closing off the sky. Moonlight vanished. The world fell into narrow tunnels of truck light and shadow that seemed to absorb every sound. Then, something caught my eye. A branch on the right side snapped downward, slow and deliberate, bending under the weight of something climbing down the embankment. The movement was careful, controlled, human. My heart beat louder in my chest, and when I looked closer, I saw the outline of a man stepping carefully through the brush, matching the truck's pace with unnatural calm. He didn't look up. He didn't rush. He just followed, close enough to reach us if the truck stopped. Eleanor saw him too. Her hand gripped my arm with surprising strength, her voice strangled. "I told you, he waits until you feel safe." She sank lower in her seat, pulling the blanket tighter around herself as if she could disappear into the fabric. "He always waits." A sign up ahead flickered into view, an old metal plate rusted at the edges, barely readable. "Rest area, 1 mile." Normally a welcome sight on nights like this. Tonight it felt like a trap, a rest area in the dark surrounded by trees. Isolated, quiet, just the kind of place a man like Samuel could corner someone without being interrupted. Eleanor shook her head frantically when she saw it. "Don't pull in, please. He knows that stop. He used to meet me there when I walked home from the store." Her voice broke apart. He'd stand by the vending machines pretending he was waiting for something, but he wasn't. He was waiting for me. The branches alongside the truck rustled again, closer this time. My instinct screamed, not just danger, intent, the kind that comes from someone who has been rehearsing how to isolate prey. Every mile of road I've driven, every memory of nights darker than morality itself, every instinct honed by survival told me the same thing. Samuel wasn't chasing us. He was shepherding us, guiding us into the part of the night he controlled. And the rest area ahead, that was his ground. The rest area sign glowed faintly in the truck's headlights, flickering like it was struggling to stay alive in the cold. Normally, a spot like that meant coffee, a bathroom break, maybe a chance to stretch aching muscles. But tonight it felt like a warning, an omen painted in rust and moonlight. Eleanor's breath hitched when she saw it again through the windshield, and her fingers curled into tight knots around the blanket. "Please, don't stop there," she whispered, her voice barely rising above the hum of the heater. "He knows that place. Every corner, every blind spot." Her eyes went distant for a moment, haunted by memories she wished she could unsee. "He used to stand behind the vending machine building, waiting for anyone who'd pull in alone. He watches people. Always watching." She shuddered. "He watched me so many times." The wind cut across the road, blowing powdered snow into spirals that danced in the headlights. The truck shuddered lightly as a gust hit us from the side, but my focus stayed locked on the tree line. The silhouette we'd seen earlier, the one pacing us, wasn't visible now. That didn't comfort me. Men like Samuel didn't disappear. They repositioned. The turnoff to the rest area approached on the right, a long, slow curve dipping into darkness. The fluorescent lights over the parking spots flickered weakly, casting stretched shadows across empty picnic tables. The bathroom building stood at the back, soaked in shadow. No cars, no movement, nothing except a hollow silence that felt unnaturally thick. As we passed the entrance, I saw something that chilled me more than the cold outside. Footprints. A single line of footprints leading toward the building. Fresh, deep, precise, not wandering or uncertain, purposeful. And there were no footprints leading away from it. Eleanor saw them too, and her reaction confirmed my fear. Her shoulders tightened, her breath faltered, her fingers clawed at the blanket. "He's waiting," she whispered. "He's waiting for us to stop." I drove past the rest area without a second thought, the truck growling as I gave it more gas. Eleanor sagged back in the seat, but relief never reached her face. She stared at the mirror instead, watching the entrance recede. A moment passed, then another, and then something moved. In the glow of the truck's taillights, a figure slipped out from behind the restroom building, tall, slow, deliberate. He didn't chase. He didn't shout. He didn't run. He simply stepped forward and watched us leave. Not panicked, not rushed, not frustrated, calculated. He knew the road better than we did. He knew the pattern of the night. He knew there would be another chance. The truck climbed the small slope leading away from the rest area, and when we reached the top, I stole one last glance in the mirror. He was still standing there, not moving, just waiting. "Why is he doing this?" I muttered under my breath. Eleanor didn't hesitate. "Because if he can't have me, no one can." The heater hummed, fighting off the cold, pressing against the windows. But inside that cab, an even colder truth settled in. He didn't want to scare her. He wanted to break her, slowly, methodically, until she'd be too exhausted to run. I accelerated into the long stretch of highway that followed, but the night felt different now, heavier, more aware. The woods to our right thickened, branches scratching the guardrail as if urging us off the road. The temperature dropped another degree, and every now and then, a shape moved between the trees. He wasn't behind us anymore. He was ahead of us, waiting at the next place where we'd have no choice but to slow down. A narrowing road, a sharp turn, a bridge, a stop sign. Men like Samuel didn't sprint. They cornered. The highway tightened into a narrow passage flanked by heavy woods, the kind where even the moon hesitates to shine. The truck's headlights pushed forward in two pale beams, carving a path through darkness that felt older than the road itself. Eleanor kept staring out her window, her breath fogging the glass, her trembling fingers tracing invisible circles on the blanket, as if grounding herself to reality. The next mile stretched flat and straight, deceptively calm, but the tension in my gut only sharpened. Men like Samuel don't chase, they plan, they anticipate, they choose the places where the world naturally slows you down, places where you're forced into their pace. And up ahead I saw exactly that, a tight left bend where the hillside pressed so close, the guardrail almost scraped the trailer, a blind turn, one of the worst on this stretch of highway. "I don't like this," I muttered, more to myself than to her. Eleanor heard anyway. She stiffened. "He knows this road better than we do," she whispered. "He used to walk it at night, hours at a time. Sometimes he'd come back covered in mud, or scratched up." Her voice trailed off as the memory swallowed her. "He said the dark was peaceful, said he could think better in it." The truck's headlights traced the curve ahead, and that's when I saw it. Something shining on the right side of the road. A glint off metal, a shape low to the ground, kneeling, hiding, watching. I slowed just enough to identify it, but the moment the beams touched it fully, my stomach twisted. A tire iron, lying neatly across the asphalt. Placed, not dropped. I clenched the wheel harder. Tools don't end up in the middle of the road on accident, especially not placed perfectly in the lane where a truck's tires would hit it. A blowout on a curve like this? We'd roll into the ravine before the engine finished screaming. Eleanor noticed the tension in my posture. "What is it?" she asked. "Nothing you need to see," I said quickly, steering wide to avoid the trap. Her breath trembled. "He's trying to stop the truck." It wasn't a question. "He wants you to pull over. He's not getting that tonight." But even as I spoke, I felt the shift. The road grew quieter. The trees pressed in closer, bending under a wind that hadn't been there a minute before. And somewhere deeper in the woods, a faint, rhythmic crunch rose. Footsteps, measured, matching us, not running, walking, always walking. The turn snapped into view, a tight curve around a rock face with nowhere to pull over, nowhere to escape. The kind of place where headlights only reveal what's directly in front of you, never what waits around the bend. As we entered the curve, my headlights grazed the embankment, and for half a breath I saw him, Samuel, standing just beyond the guardrail, facing the truck, head tilted, hands at his sides, as if he'd been waiting for us. Eleanor gasped, clutching the dashboard. Her voice cracked. "He found us. Hold on," I cut in. I didn't brake. Braking would have given him time. Instead, I held steady, guiding the rig through the bend with precision sharpened by 1,000 nights on unfamiliar roads. Samuel stepped closer to the guardrail, just enough for the headlights to catch his face. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't angry. He was calm, like this was the moment he'd been working toward. But he didn't jump out. He didn't lunge. He didn't try to throw himself in front of the truck. Instead, as we passed him, his eyes moved, slowly following Eleanor's window, tracking her, measuring her, waiting for the next corner. And I realized something brutal. He wasn't trying to stop the truck tonight. He was trying to exhaust her, to drain her, to make her panic until she couldn't think, so that when she finally broke, he could step out of the dark and be the only familiar thing left. As the road straightened, my hands tightened on the wheel. This wasn't a chase, it was a dismantling, one Samuel had rehearsed long before tonight. The road leveled out, and for a few precious seconds the truck glided through a patch of open highway, where the trees fell back and the sky widened just enough to breathe again. But the relief was thin, fragile, already cracking at the edges. Samuel had shown himself deliberately. He wanted us to know he was near. He wanted Eleanor's fear stretched tight, pulled thinner and thinner until it snapped. Inside the cab, Eleanor trembled violently, wiping tears with the back of her hand. "He's not going to stop," she whispered. "Even if the police came, even if the road ended. He told me once that he doesn't get scared of anything except being ignored." Her fingers dug into the blanket, and I stopped answering him. Her words sank into me deeper than they should have. Men like Samuel don't break suddenly. They erode. A year of loneliness, a cracked sense of identity, then obsession grows in the gaps. The worst kind of danger in this world isn't supernatural. It's human, desperate, convinced it's owed something. The hum of the truck steadied us for a moment, until it didn't. Ahead, on the right shoulder, something caught the beam of my highlights, just long enough to knot my stomach. A shape crouched low near the tree line, not standing, not walking, crouched, like an animal waiting to spring. I eased off the accelerator, but didn't brake. Braking would be a gift. Eleanor lifted her head slowly, dread blooming across her face even before the shape stood. No, Rowan, he's cutting us off." Samuel stepped out onto the shoulder, not rushing, not stumbling. Measured, intentional. His clothing blended into the trees, dark jacket, mud-stained jeans, but his posture was unmistakable. Shoulders slightly hunched, head low, gaze fixed entirely on her side of the truck. He didn't chase. He didn't wave his arms. He didn't scream her name. He simply stepped down the embankment and began walking parallel with us again, matching our speed with terrifying ease. His boots sunk deep into the snow, but his balance never faltered. He'd been stalking through these woods longer than we'd been driving. I forced myself not to react. Fear is fuel to men like him. Eleanor leaned away from the window, covering her mouth with trembling hands. He used to walk outside my backyard fence for hours, she whispered. Didn't matter if it rained or snowed, he just walked, like he was practicing something. He had been, practicing patience, practicing pursuit, practicing proximity without contact. The worst kind of hunter isn't the one who charges. It's the one who waits until you're too exhausted to run. Snow began falling harder, thick, heavy flakes that blurred the edges of the headlights. The storm wasn't violent, but dense. The kind of snow that eats distance, disguises shapes, lets danger slip from one shadow to the next. My palms slicked with sweat on the wheel. We're not stopping, I said firmly. Not for anything. Not until we hit town. Eleanor shook her head. He won't let us reach town. Her voice wasn't panicked. It was resigned. He doesn't have to catch us, she whispered. He just has to slow us down. As if the night had been waiting for those words. The truck dipped suddenly, front tire sliding into a shallow rut hidden beneath the snow. The trailer jolted, swaying dangerously before I corrected the steering. Eleanor gasped, gripping the seat. My pulse thundered. From the tree line, Samuel paused, watched the slip, watched the correction, tilted his head. He was studying me now, my reactions, my mistakes, my instincts, finding weaknesses, sorting through them like tools laid out on a workbench. He stepped closer to the edge of the shoulder, close enough to show he was comfortable, close enough to remind us who controlled the pace of this night. Eleanor clenched her teeth. He's trying to make us crash, but I knew better. He didn't want to crash. He wanted a moment. A moment when the truck had to slow, had to stop, even just for a second, because 1 second is all a man like Samuel needs. And as we pushed deeper into the narrowing mountain road, I realized the truth that chilled me far more than the storm. Samuel wasn't chasing us. He was escorting us, guiding us toward the next place he'd already chosen. The road narrowed again, curving around a slope where the mountain dipped sharply on one side and rose like a wall on the other. My headlights barely reached more than 20 feet ahead now, snow falling thicker, heavier, each flake blurring the world into white fog. The truck rumbled forward, but something in the air had shifted. The night no longer felt like empty space. It felt occupied, predetermined, arranged. Eleanor stared straight ahead, her breath shaky, her fingers twisted in the blanket as if she were holding on to the last safe thing left in her world. He knows this stretch, she whispered. He used to walk it every evening, even before sunset. Said the air tasted different up here. Her voice cracked. I should have realized then. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't want to, but because I suddenly understood why Samuel had spent so much time on this mountain road. He wasn't walking for exercise or fresh air. He was mapping it, learning its rhythms, counting the blind corners, the dips, the quiet pockets, picking out the places where a car or a truck would have no choice but to slow down. Up ahead, the forest grew dense again, branches so thick they blocked out what little moonlight remained. And then I saw it. An orange glow flickering at the bend ahead. Not fire, not an accident, a flare, one of those emergency road flares. Its light sputtered in the wind, spilling long red streaks across the snow. Eleanor gasped. He used those when he wanted people to stop near my house. He'd pretend someone needed help. Her voice trembled. He's doing it again. My stomach clenched. A single flare in the middle of nowhere, on a night like this, wasn't an accident. And the way it sat on the road, dead center, perfectly placed, told me everything I needed to know. Samuel wasn't improvising. He was executing a plan. I slowed the truck, not enough to stop, just enough not to crush the flare or risk sliding on it. As the headlights washed over the bend, something caught my eye on the right shoulder. A backpack, small, gray, torn, deliberately laid out where any driver would see it. And next to it, half hidden in the snow, lay a glove, a woman's glove, pink, wool, frozen flat. Eleanor's voice broke. That's mine. My pulse spiked. He'd taken it from her house. Maybe tonight, maybe weeks ago. A trophy, a lure, something to pull us in. I drove forward slower this time, because now I knew the trap wasn't the flare. It was what came after it. As the truck rolled past the bend, the headlights stretched into a clearing where the trees opened wider, too wide, a perfect pocket of darkness. A perfect place for someone to wait. My heart hammered as I searched the shadows, expecting him to emerge, to rush the cab to force us off the road. But he didn't. He wasn't there. The absence was worse. Eleanor pressed her forehead to the window, her voice a thin quiver. He's not waiting on the road anymore. She didn't have to finish. Her words landed in my chest like a punch, because I realized exactly where he'd gone. The clearing wasn't his goal. The flare wasn't his goal. The glove wasn't his goal. Those were distractions. What he wanted, what he needed, was a moment when the truck slowed enough for him to reach it. A moment like now. A moment when the rig was crawling around a bend. A moment when the noise of the engine masked softer sounds. A moment when the snow was deep enough to hide footsteps approaching from the side. And that's when I heard it. A thud, soft, heavy, on the passenger side rear door. Eleanor jolted upright, eyes wide, breath frozen in her throat. The sound came again, closer this time, higher. The sick realization hit me hard. Samuel wasn't behind us. He wasn't beside us. He wasn't ahead of us. He was climbing onto the truck. The thud vibrated through the cab. Subtle but unmistakable, the kind of sound a man makes when he plants his weight on metal. Not a slip, not an accident, a deliberate grip. Eleanor's fingers flew to her mouth as her breath hitched in panic. I felt her fear like a jolt to my chest. She wasn't imagining it. Neither was I. Samuel had climbed onto the truck. The engine roared beneath us as I pressed harder on the accelerator, tires fighting through the thick snow. But even with the speed rising, the shape of his presence held firm, pressing, shifting, crawling with sickening certainty toward the front of the cab. The footsteps weren't pounding or frantic. They were slow, measured, as if he was enjoying the final steps of a journey he'd been rehearsing in his mind for far too long. Eleanor's voice cracked. He's done this before. Her hands trembled violently. When my roof was damaged during the storm last year, I thought it was raccoons, but the steps, they weren't animals. He was practicing. She closed her eyes as the truth tore through her. He was practicing this. The truck jolted as something heavy shifted above us. The roof creaked under Samuel's weight. Snow dusted down across the windshield, caught in the wipers. My grip tightened, breath controlled, every muscle focused on keeping the rig steady, because if he reached the hood, if he got in front of the glass, he'd have leverage, a way to force a stop, a way to get inside. I steered into the center of the road, giving myself as much space as the narrow mountain lane would allow. The snowstorm intensified, wind battering the sides of the truck hard enough to rattle the mirrors. The wipers struggled, visibility narrowed to a tunnel, but stopping was an impossibility. Speed was our only defense. Then, another sound. Metal bending, fingers gripping the roof's edge, a shadow sliding forward. He was approaching the windshield. Rowan, Eleanor's voice failed as her eyes locked upward, tracking the shape of her nightmare crawling his way into her line of sight. I made a decision, one I didn't have time to question. A long bend stretched ahead, tight and steep, but angled in a way I'd memorized from dozens of long nights on this route. A curve where the truck naturally leaned hard to the left. A curve that could throw off the balance of anything, or anyone, clinging to the roof. But timing would be everything. I floored the accelerator. The truck lunged forward, the engine roaring like a wounded animal. Snow blasted across the windshield. Ice cracked beneath the tires. The trailer swayed dangerously, but speed gave me control. Barely. The footsteps above grew louder, closer. He was near the top of the windshield now. His fingers curled over the edge of the roof. One hand, then another. Eleanor screamed. And then, the curve hit. I pulled hard left. The truck leaned with a violent shift, tilting just enough that anything on top had to fight gravity to stay planted. The trailer swung wide. Snow exploded into the air. The cab shuddered under the weight of the turn. A loud slip, a drag, a scraping sound of someone losing grip. Then, a final thud on the passenger side, and silence. I didn't look back. I didn't slow down. Not until the road widened, and the forest thinned, and the first distant glow of the town's streetlights broke through the storm. Eleanor collapsed into the seat, sobbing into her hands. Relief, exhaustion, release. A lifetime of fear expelling itself in shaking breaths. I kept driving until the safety of the town swallowed us whole. At the emergency station, the nurses helped her inside. One held her shoulders. Another wrapped a blanket around her. She looked back at me once, eyes glassy, grateful, broken. "You saved my life," she whispered. I shook my head. "You ran. You saved your own. I just gave you a ride." She managed a smile before disappearing into the building. For a long moment, I stayed in the cab, letting the heat thaw the cold in my bones. The storm outside began to die down, flakes drifting lazily now in soft spirals. I finally stepped out, stretching stiff muscles. watching the snow settle across the parking lot. That's when I saw them. On the right side of my truck near the door, footprints, deep, human, leading away into the darkness beyond the streetlights. 3 steps, 4, then nothing, vanished into the night. Samuel had survived the fall, but he hadn't stayed to confront me. He hadn't waited for Eleanor. He had slipped silently into the world again. And men like him don't disappear. They relocate. They find new shadows, new roads, new targets. Some dangers don't end. They move on. I climbed back into my truck, the heater warming my face as I gripped the wheel once more. If this story shook you, I murmured, my voice low and steady, hit that like button. Stories like this aren't just tales, they're warnings. And the more people hear them, the more eyes open to the signs they ignored. I shifted into gear. Subscribe if you want to keep riding with me. Out here, the nights are long, and there's always someone who needs protecting. The engine rumbled to life, and trust me, this road has more stories to tell.